Just for changing his Wi-Fi password, Jalen Harris, a black engineer, was reported to 911 by his neighbor, falsely labeled a threat. Absurd prejudice put him in the crosshairs, but when the police arrived, a chilling truth came to light. Someone was watching the entire neighborhood through security cameras. From suspect to whistleblower, Jalen uncovered a sinister plot, exposing a hidden figure right in the heart of the community. Will justice prevail, or will prejudice obscure the truth? Dive into this story of truth and courage. If you're hooked, hit that like button to show your support, share to spread the message against prejudice, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories. Comment your thoughts. What will Jalen do? Let's get started. In Crestwood, Missouri, a peaceful afternoon unfolded, with gentle golden sunlight casting a glow on the red brick houses. Jalen Harris, 32, a black network engineer, stood in his front yard, phone in hand, his gaze focused on the screen. He wore a gray hoodie, a baseball cap pulled low, trying not to draw attention. Jalen had just noticed his Wi-Fi running unusually slow, and when he checked his router, he spotted a strange device, Crestwood_net22, that he didn't recognize. Living alone and never sharing his password, Jalen knew something was off. He stepped into the yard for a better signal, his fingers moving quickly to change the password, discreetly starting a recording on his smartwatch just in case he needed proof. From the window across the street, Patricia Walsh, 55, watched Jalen, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. To Pat, Jalen had always been an outsider, quiet, never joining neighborhood barbecues, and once declining her invitation to the local neighborhood watch group. She gripped the curtains tightly, muttering, "He's up to something again." Seeing Jalen lingering in his yard with his phone, Pat didn't think twice. She snapped a quick photo through the window, sent it to the neighborhood group chat with the message, "Weird neighbor at it again." Then, without hesitation, she dialed 911. "I need to report suspicious activity. My neighbor, he's standing in his yard, keeps tapping on his phone. I don't know what he's doing, but I feel unsafe. Come quick." Jalen looked up as the sound of sirens echoed down the street. A patrol car pulled up in front of his house, and two officers stepped out. Detective Victor Lang, 40, tall and imposing, with a sharp gaze, and Officer Mia Torres, 32, petite but composed, her demeanor calm yet serious. Jalen took a deep breath, staying calm, his eyes scanning them. He knew situations like this could escalate fast. "Hi there," Lang said, his voice deep, his hand resting near his belt. "I'm Detective Lang, and this is Officer Torres. We got a report of suspicious activity. What are you doing out here?" Jalen frowned, his gaze sharp but his voice steady. "Suspicious," he repeated, a hint of sarcasm in his tone. "I'm standing in my own yard, changing my Wi-Fi password because the network's slow." "What's suspicious about that?" He held up his phone, his finger still on the smartwatch, recording every word. Torres stepped forward, her eyes observant. "You said the network's slow. Anything unusual, Mr. Harris?" "Jalen Harris," Jalen replied, his gaze never leaving her. "I saw a strange device on my network, Crestwood_net22. It's not mine. I live alone, and I don't share my password. Maybe you should ask the neighbors if they know anything." He glanced toward Pat's house, where she stood on her porch, arms crossed, her eyes blazing. Pat marched over, her voice sharp as she pointed at Jalen. "Don't play innocent, Harris. You've been out here for 10 minutes, just tapping away on that phone like you're up to no good. You never talk to anyone, always sneaking around. I know you're doing something wrong." Jalen turned to her, his eyes cold as ice. "Sneaking around? Pat, you called the cops because I'm standing in my own yard?" He emphasized his words, his voice cutting. "What proof do you have, or is this just because I didn't join your neighborhood watch group? Let's be real. What makes me a threat in your eyes?" "The fact that I'm black." Pat's face turned red, her voice shaky but still aggressive. "Don't bring that into this. I'm just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. You refused to help us, always keeping your distance. Now you're out here, messing with your phone. Who knows what you're up to?" Maybe you're hacking something. Lang raised a hand, his tone serious. Both of you, calm down. Ms. Walsh, do you have any concrete evidence that Mr. Harris is doing something illegal? And Mr. Harris, you mentioned a strange device. Ms. Walsh, do you know anything about this? Pat stepped back, her eyes wavering. I don't know anything about Wi-Fi, she stammered, but I took a picture of him standing here. I sent it to the neighborhood group chat. Everyone thinks he's weird too. Jalen let out a dry laugh, his eyes flashing with anger. You took a picture of me? You made me a suspect because I'm fixing my Wi-Fi. Ms. Walsh, if I wanted to hack something, I wouldn't be standing in the middle of my own yard. He turned to Lang, his voice even. You want to see my router? I've got the connection logs, but I want to record this conversation. I know how these situations can go sideways. Torres nodded, her gaze respectful. Fair enough. We just want to clear things up. Are you okay with us checking the router? Jalen gripped his phone tightly, his eyes flicking to Pat. Fine, he said, his voice cold. But I want Ms. Walsh to explain why she thinks I'm shady. She once said I don't belong in this neighborhood. Want to repeat that now? Pat's face flushed, her voice quieter. I'm just protecting the neighborhood. You don't fit in, you refused to help us. I felt uneasy, that's all. Lang sighed, his expression stern. Ms. Walsh, a feeling isn't evidence. Mr. Harris, let's go inside. We need to see that router to verify your story. As they walked away, Pat shouted after them, check him thoroughly. I know he's hiding something. Jalen stopped, turning back, his gaze like a dagger. Ms. Walsh, you should be careful about what you know. Maybe the one hiding something isn't me. He stepped into his house, feeling like he'd just ignited a war. But he had no idea the truth about to unravel would make the whole neighborhood shudder. Jalen Harris's home in Crestwood, Missouri, was steeped in tension, like a courtroom on edge. The white glow of the ceiling light illuminated the dining table, where Jalen had set up his laptop, its screen displaying the router interface with a list of connected devices. Jalen, 32, a black network engineer, sat upright, his sharp gaze focused on the data, his smartwatch still recording every sound. Across from him were Detective Victor Lang and Officer Mia Torres, their eyes scanning the screen, ready to analyze. Patricia Pat Walsh, 55, stood near the doorway, arms crossed tightly, her face flushed with a mix of worry and defiance. Just minutes ago, she had accused Jalen of suspicious activity for standing in his yard changing his Wi-Fi password, but now her eyes wavered, as if sensing the tide was turning. Here, Jalen said, his voice low but sharp, pointing to a line on the screen. Crestwood_net22. This device isn't mine. I live alone, and the only things connected to my Wi-Fi are my laptop, phone, and TV. I've never shared my password, but this thing has been hogging my bandwidth for a week now. He looked up, his gaze locking onto Lang. I was changing the password because I suspected someone was on my network. That's why I was out in the yard. Lang leaned in, his eyes narrowing. Crestwood_net22, he repeated, his voice deep. Have you noticed any unusual activity from this device? Jalen nodded, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. I checked the connection logs, he said, pulling up a window filled with data. It's not just using my Wi-Fi, it's accessing. He paused, his expression darkening. Oh my God, it's tapping into my security cameras. He turned the laptop, the screen showing a live feed from the cameras outside his door and in his living room. Someone's watching my house, right now. The dining room fell silent. Torres stepped closer, her gaze sharp. Security cameras. You're saying someone hacked into your system? Jalen nodded, his voice cold as ice. Exactly, but it doesn't stop there. He clicked again, pulling up another log, his face hardening. This device isn't just watching my cameras. It's accessing other cameras in the neighborhood. Look at this. He pointed to a list of IP addresses, one standing out as familiar. This is Ms. Walsh's house. Pat stumbled back, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wild with panic. My house? She stammered, her voice trembling. No, that's impossible. You're making this up, Harris. You did something to my network, didn't you? Jalen turned to her, his gaze like a dagger. Making it up, Ms. Walsh, you called the cops because I was standing in my own yard. Now you think I hacked the whole neighborhood? If I wanted to do something shady, I wouldn't be inviting them to look at my laptop. His voice was sharp, cutting her off, leaving Pat speechless. Lang raised a hand, his tone serious. Ms. Walsh, let Mr. Harris explain. Mr. Harris, go on. What else do you have? Jalen took a deep breath, his fingers moving swiftly, pulling up a video feed. The screen displayed a living room with a green armchair and a family photo on the wall. Pat let out a choked gasp. That's my house, she cried, her voice breaking. How do you have this? What did you do to my camera? Jalen shook his head, his eyes never leaving the screen. I didn't do anything, Ms. Walsh. Someone is using Crestwood_net22 to watch your camera, my camera, and probably the whole neighborhood. He clicked again, and another video popped up, a hallway, then a bedroom with a double bed and a wedding photo. Pat covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. That's my daughter's bedroom, she whispered, her voice choked. Someone's watching her. Torres turned to Pat, her voice gentle but firm. Ms. Walsh, stay calm. Mr. Harris isn't the culprit. This device is the problem. Mr. Harris, can you see where the data's going? Jalen nodded, his expression grim. I'm tracing it now. He opened a network analysis app, his fingers moving like a dance. The data isn't going to a public server. It's being sent through an encrypted messaging app, the kind only pros use. He paused, his eyes widening. Wait, the signal's coming from the neighborhood. It's close. Really close. Lang leaned in, his voice tense. How close? Can you get a specific location? Jalen clicked again, his eyes now burning with intensity. I'm narrowing it down. The strongest signal is coming from. He stopped, looking at Pat, his voice low. Ms. Walsh's house. Pat stepped back, bumping into a chair, her eyes filled with panic. My house. No, you're wrong. There's no one in my house doing that. You're trying to pin this on me, aren't you? You hacked my network, then made up this story. Jalen let out a dry laugh, his eyes flashing with anger. Ms. Walsh, I'm a network engineer, not a criminal. If I wanted to pin this on you, I wouldn't be sitting here letting you call the cops on me. Someone in your house, or near your house, is controlling Crestwood_net22. And they're watching all of us. Pat covered her mouth, her eyes flickering between fear and doubt. No, that's impossible, she muttered, but her voice weakened, as if she were remembering something. My daughter, she's home alone today. Torres placed a hand on Pat's shoulder, her voice soft. Ms. Walsh, we need to check it out. Mr. Harris, can you confirm the exact signal location? Jalen nodded, his fingers moving quickly. I'm comparing signal strengths. Give me a minute. He pulled up a map of the neighborhood on his laptop, signal points blinking on the screen. Got it. The strongest signal is coming from the second floor of Ms. Walsh's house. Specifically, the East Room. Pat collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. The East Room, that's Ethan's room, she whispered, her voice breaking. My nephew, no, it can't be him. Lang turned to Pat, his gaze stern. Who's Ethan? We need to talk to him. Right now. Jalen closed his laptop, his eyes now a storm. Ms. Walsh, you wanted to protect the neighborhood, then help them find the truth. Because someone isn't just watching your cameras, they're watching our entire lives. Pat buried her face in her hands, tears dripping onto the floor. Lang pulled out his radio, his voice firm. I need a cybersecurity team to Crestwood now. We've got an illegal surveillance case. He turned to Jalen, his eyes full of respect. Mr. Harris, thank you. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have known about this. Jalen nodded, but his gaze remained cold. Don't thank me. Thank Ms. Walsh for calling you guys. If she hadn't, I'd never have known someone was watching the whole neighborhood. Torres looked at Pat, her voice low. Ms. Walsh, take us to your house. We need to meet Ethan. Pat stood, her legs trembling, each step feeling like an admission that she had been wrong, completely wrong. The air on the streets of Crestwood, Missouri, hung heavy, like the calm before a storm. The sun was setting, a fiery red sunset casting its glow on Patricia, Pat, Walsh's brick house, where Jalen Harris, Detective Victor Lang, Officer Mia Torres, and Pat were heading. Jalen, 32, a black network engineer, walked with a sharp gaze, his laptop tucked under his arm, his smartwatch still recording every sound. Just minutes ago, at his house, he had traced the signal from the mysterious device Crestwood_Net22, discovering it originated from the East Room on the second floor of Pat's house, her nephew Ethan Walsh's room. Pat, 55, led the way, her legs trembling, her face pale, her eyes flickering between fear and disbelief. She had called 911 suspecting Jalen of being shady, but now the truth weighed heavily on her. The person surveilling the entire neighborhood might be her own family. "It can't be Ethan," Pat muttered, her voice choked, her hand gripping the keys tightly. "He's just a kid, he wouldn't do something like that." She glanced at Jalen, her eyes a mix of pleading and resentment. "You're wrong, Harris. You have to be wrong." Jalen stayed silent, his gaze cold but not hostile. "I'm not wrong, Ms. Walsh," he said, his voice low. "The signal is coming from his room. If you want to protect Ethan, let them get to the bottom of this." He nodded toward Lang and Torres, who were walking quickly, their expressions stern. Lang turned to Pat, his voice firm. "Ms. Walsh, open the door. We need to speak with Ethan right now. If he's innocent, we'll clear things up." Pat stopped at the door, her hands shaking so badly the keys nearly slipped. I don't want to believe it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But if it's true, my daughter, she's home today. If someone's watching the cameras." Her voice broke, unable to finish the thought. Torres placed a hand on Pat's shoulder, her voice gentle but resolute. "Ms. Walsh, we'll find the truth. Open the door." Pat took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and led them inside. The living room was quiet, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air, but the silence felt heavy, like a warning of something sinister. "Ethan," Pat called, her voice trembling, standing at the bottom of the stairs. "Come down here right now. Someone needs to talk to you." There was no response, only the faint sound of music drifting from the second floor, as if someone was wearing headphones. Pat turned to Lang, her eyes panicked. He might be studying. He's always in his room." Lang exchanged a look with Torres, then nodded. "Let's go up." He took the lead, climbing the stairs, followed by Torres, Pat, and Jalen. Jalen kept his distance, his eyes scanning the narrow hallway lined with family photos on the walls. One picture showed Ethan, 19, smiling next to Pat, making Jalen frown. He remembered the time Ethan asked him for help with network programming, but Jalen had turned him down because he was too busy. Could that have been the trigger? They stopped at the door to the East Room. Techno music leaped out, accompanied by the sound of typing. Lang knocked hard, his voice commanding. "Ethan Walsh, this is the police. Open the door now." The music cut off abruptly, followed by the screech of a chair swiveling. The door opened slowly, revealing Ethan, tall and lanky, with messy hair, his eyes darting nervously. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tense, his hand gripping the edge of the door. "Aunt Pat, what's happening?" Pat stepped forward, her voice choked. "Ethan, tell me you didn't do anything wrong. They're saying someone hacked the neighborhood cameras, and the signal's coming from your room." Ethan blinked, his gaze flickering over Lang, Torres, and landing on Jalen. "You," he muttered, his voice tinged with resentment. "What are you doing here, Harris? Stirring up trouble again?" Jalen tilted his head, his gaze like a dagger. "Stirring up trouble? Ethan, I was just changing my Wi-Fi password, and suddenly I found out someone's watching my cameras, and the whole neighborhood's. The signal's coming from your room. Care to explain?" Ethan let out a laugh, but it was shaky. "Explain? You're crazy. I didn't do anything. Maybe you got it wrong, Mr. Great Network Engineer." He emphasized the last part, his tone dripping with sarcasm, but his hand trembled slightly, his eyes avoiding Jalen's. Lang stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over it. A laptop open on the desk, its screen displaying lines of code, a secondary router sitting in the corner. "Ethan, we need to see your laptop," he said, his voice unyielding. Mr. Harris traced the signal from Crestwood_net22 to this room. It's accessing security cameras, including your aunt's house. Ethan stepped back, his eyes wide with panic. Crestwood what? I don't know anything about that. He turned to Pat, his voice rising. Aunt Pat, you believe me, right? I was just studying, playing games, that's it. Pat covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Ethan, tell the truth, she cried, her voice breaking. They have video from our cameras, my daughter's room. If you did something, say it, please. Torres watched Ethan closely, her gaze sharp. Mr. Walsh, if you're innocent, let us check the laptop. If not, we'll get a search warrant, and things will get worse. Ethan clenched his fists, his eyes darting to Jalen with a hint of resentment. You did this, didn't you, Harris? Because I asked you to teach me programming and you said no, so you set me up to get back at me? Jalen let out a dry laugh, his eyes flashing with anger. Get back at you, Ethan, I was busy, so I said no. But if you think hacking the neighborhood cameras is getting back at me, you've made a big mistake. I didn't set you up, Dad doesn't lie. He held up his laptop, his voice cold. Want me to run the trace again in front of you? Ethan's face paled, his eyes wavering. I didn't do anything, he stammered, but his voice weakened as if his mask was cracking. He turned to Lang, his voice trembling. You have no right to search my stuff. You need a warrant. Lang shook his head, his tone firm. You're making this harder than it needs to be. If you don't cooperate, we'll come back with a warrant, and you won't like the outcome. He turned to Pat. Ms. Walsh, do you consent to us checking? This is your house. Pat lowered her head, tears dripping onto the floor. Check it, she whispered, her voice shattered. I need to know the truth. Ethan, if you're innocent, don't be afraid. Ethan stepped back, panic in his eyes, his hand reaching for the laptop as if to close it. Torres moved forward, her voice sharp. Don't touch it. Step back. Ethan froze, his eyes like those of a cornered animal. He looked at Pat, then at Jalen, his gaze filled with resentment. Jalen opened his laptop, his voice low. I'll run the trace again, so you don't think I'm making this up. He clicked, the screen displaying a signal map, a bright dot blinking right in this room. Crestwood_net22, coming from that secondary router over there. He pointed to the corner, where the router's green light blinked. Ethan, got anything to say? Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Pat collapsed into a chair, her hands covering her face. Ethan, why would you do this? She whispered, her voice filled with pain. Lang turned to Torres, his voice low. Call the cybersecurity team. We've got our guy. He looked at Jalen, his eyes full of respect. Mr. Harris, you just saved the whole neighborhood. Jalen nodded, but his gaze remained cold. I didn't set out to save anyone. I just wanted to change my Wi-Fi password. He looked at Pat, his voice low. But maybe you should have talked to your nephew before calling 911 on me. Ethan Walsh's room on the second floor of Patricia, Pat Walsh's house in Crestwood, Missouri, was steeped in tension, like a courtroom on the verge of a verdict. The LED light from Ethan's laptop flickered, its screen displaying lines of code, with a secondary router nearby, undeniable proof of the surveillance network Crestwood_net22. Ethan, 19, stood in the middle of the room, his fists clenched, his panicked eyes darting between Detective Victor Lang, Officer Mia Torres, and his aunt, Pat. Pat, 55, sat slumped in a chair, her hands covering her face, tears streaming down, unable to look at her nephew. Jalen Harris, 32, a black network engineer, stood near the door, his laptop tucked under his arm, his gaze cold but not hostile. His smartwatch continued recording, capturing every word. Just minutes ago, Jalen had traced the signal to Ethan's room, flipping Pat's accusation that he was shady for changing his Wi-Fi password. Now, the truth was exposed, but the wounds of prejudice lingered. Lang stepped forward, his voice firm, his gaze locked on Ethan. Ethan Walsh, this is your last chance to tell the truth. We know Crestwood_net22 is coming from your router. You hacked into the neighborhood security cameras, including your aunt's house. Why? Ethan stumbled back, his back hitting the wall, his eyes trembling. I didn't mean to, he stammered, his voice rising. It was just an experiment. I'm learning to code. I wanted to see what I could do. He shot a glare at Jalen, his eyes blazing. If Harris hadn't stuck his nose in, no one would have known. Jalen tilted his head, his voice low but sharp as a blade. Stuck my nose in? Ethan, I changed my Wi-Fi password because the network was slow. I didn't expect to find you watching my cameras, Ms. Walsh's, and the whole neighborhood's. You call that an experiment? Or were you getting back at me for not teaching you programming? Ethan's face flushed, his eyes wavering. Getting back at you? You're too full of yourself, Harris. I don't need you. He turned to Pat, his voice trembling. Aunt Pat, you know I'm not like that. I was curious, I swear. I didn't hurt anyone. Pat looked up, her face soaked with tears, her voice shattered. Curious? Ethan, you watched the camera in her room, she shouted, her trembling hand pointing to a family photo on the wall. My daughter, your cousin. Do you know how scared she'd be if she knew someone was watching her? How could you do this? Torres stepped forward, her voice gentle but serious. Mr. Walsh, curiosity isn't an excuse. You accessed private networks and cameras without permission, violating the privacy of dozens of people. That's a serious crime. She pulled out handcuffs, her gaze never leaving Ethan. You need to come with us to the station. Ethan's face went pale, his eyes wide with panic. Handcuffs? No, wait. He turned to Lang, his voice pleading. I didn't sell the data. I didn't do anything bad. I just watched. I swear. Lang shook his head, his voice cold. Just watched. You spied on bedrooms, living rooms, people's private lives. You think that's not harmful? Ethan Walsh, you're under arrest for unauthorized computer access and illegal surveillance. He nodded to Torres, who stepped forward to cuff Ethan. Pat burst into sobs, standing up, her hands reaching out as if to stop them. No, please don't, she choked out. He's my nephew. He's just a kid, he doesn't understand. Please, give him a chance. She turned to Jalen, her eyes begging. Harris, please say something. You know Ethan didn't mean any harm, right? Jalen took a deep breath, his gaze now a smoldering fire. Ms. Walsh, you called 911 because I was standing in my own yard, thinking I was a threat. Now you're asking me to help Ethan? He paused, his voice low. I grew up in St. Louis, getting suspected just for my skin color, called suspicious just for walking at night. I don't want Ethan to be ruined, but he has to take responsibility. And so do you, for judging me before knowing the truth. Pat lowered her head, tears dripping onto the floor. I was wrong, she whispered, her voice filled with pain. I was scared, I didn't think. I saw you, you were different from everyone else, and I. She stopped, unable to finish. Torres gently led Ethan out of the room, his head bowed, no longer resisting, his eyes empty. Lang turned to Pat, his voice softer. Ms. Walsh, we're taking him to the station. He'll have a lawyer, but you need to prepare yourself. This is a serious case. Pat nodded, her hand covering her mouth, unable to watch as Ethan was led away. She turned to Jalen, her voice trembling. Harris, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I didn't know Ethan. I didn't know how wrong I was. Jalen looked at her, his gaze softening but still resolute. Ms. Walsh, an apology doesn't erase the hurt. I'm not your enemy, but you chose to see me as one. If you want to make things right, don't just apologize, change. Ask yourself, why did you think I was a threat, but not Ethan? Pat collapsed back into the chair, unable to respond, tears streaming down her face. Lang patted Jalen on the shoulder, his eyes full of respect. Mr. Harris, you did an incredible job. If it weren't for you, we'd never have uncovered this. Want to come to the station to give a statement? Jalen shook his head, his voice low. I've done my part. You know where to find me if you need me. He glanced at Pat one last time. Ms. Walsh, you've got a chance to do the right thing. Don't waste it. He walked out of the room, the sound of Ethan's handcuffs echoing behind him. Outside, the sunset had faded, giving way to darkness. Ethan was led to the patrol car, his face pale under the streetlights. Pat stood on the porch, clutching her chest, her eyes lost. Jalen walked past her, not looking her way, his gaze fixed on his own house. He had only wanted to protect his privacy, but he'd accidentally uncovered a horrifying truth. Yet he knew this story wasn't over. There was still a bigger lesson for the whole neighborhood to learn. The sky over Crestwood, Missouri, was clear on a Saturday morning, sunlight filtering through the oak trees, illuminating the street where, just days ago, a police car had parked in front of Jalen Harris's house. The quiet of the neighborhood now felt different, not the false calm of before, but an awakening after the storm. Jalen, 32, a black network engineer, stood in his living room, gazing out the window. His laptop sat on the table, the router now re-encrypted, but the memory of the incident lingered. Being wrongfully suspected for changing his Wi-Fi password, uncovering the Crestwood_Net 22 surveillance network, and facing the prejudice of Patricia Walsh. Ethan Walsh, Pat's nephew, had been arrested for hacking the neighborhood security cameras, and Pat now had to face the consequences of her misjudgment. Jalen took a sip of coffee, his gaze thoughtful. He wasn't angry at Pat. He'd grown used to suspicious looks since growing up in St. Louis, where his skin color got him labeled suspicious just for walking at night. But he wanted this neighborhood to learn something. His phone lit up with a text from Detective Victor Lang. Ethan confessed. He admitted his motive was curiosity and revenge because you wouldn't teach him programming. "Thanks, Harris." Jalen nodded, setting the phone down. He didn't need thanks, he needed change. A soft knock came at the door. Jalen opened it to find Pat standing there, her face weary, her eyes red. She wore a gray sweater, her hands clasped tightly, her voice trembling. "Harris." "Jalen," she corrected herself, her voice small. "Can I talk to you?" Jalen nodded, gesturing for her to come in. "Have a seat, Ms. Walsh," he said, his tone low but not cold. He sat across from her, his gaze expectant. "What do you want to say?" Pat took a deep breath, her eyes avoiding his. I don't know where to start," she whispered. "I was wrong to call 911. I saw you standing in your yard, and I thought you were up to something shady. I was scared, and I judged you. I'm sorry, Jalen. I'm truly sorry." Jalen tilted his head, his gaze sharp. "Ms. Walsh, you didn't just judge me. You took a picture of me, sent it to the neighborhood group chat, called me weird. You thought I was a threat because I didn't fit in the way you wanted. Do you know what it's like to be seen as a criminal in your own home?" Pat lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. I know I was wrong," she choked out. "I grew up with prejudices I didn't even realize I had. When Ethan came to live with me, I thought he was harmless, just a kid messing around with computers. I never thought he'd do something like that." She covered her mouth, her voice breaking. "My daughter, she's so scared she can't sleep. And I blamed you." Jalen took a deep breath, his gaze softening but still resolute. "Ms. Walsh, I don't need an apology. I need you to do better. Not just with me, but with everyone. You called the cops because of a feeling, but feelings aren't facts. If you want to make things right, learn to observe, listen, and ask before you judge." Pat nodded, her eyes filled with regret. "I'll try," she whispered, "but I don't know how to make up for this. Ethan, he's going to pay a price, and I feel like it's my fault too. I didn't see the truth right in my own house." Jalen stood, his eyes lighting up. "Then start here," he said, his voice firm. "I'm hosting a neighborhood meeting tonight at the park. I'll talk about cybersecurity, how to secure cameras, and how we can keep prejudice from dividing us. Will you come?" Pat blinked, surprised. You're doing this after everything I put you through?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why?" Jalen gave a faint smile, his gaze deep. "Because I don't want this neighborhood to live in fear. I don't want anyone else to be wrongfully suspected like I was, or watched like your daughter was. If we don't come together, we'll fall back into this cycle." Pat nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll be there," she said, her voice steadier. "And I'll bring the neighborhood group. You deserve to be heard, Jalen." That evening, Crestwood Park glowed with lights. Over 30 neighbors gathered, sitting on folding chairs, their curious eyes fixed on Jalen. He stood in front of a whiteboard, his laptop connected to a projector. Officer Mia Torres was there too, standing by to support. Jalen began, his voice low but resonant. "Tonight, I'm not speaking as a victim. I'm speaking as a neighbor. This week, we discovered someone hacked the neighborhood's cameras, watching our private lives. I was wrongfully suspected for changing my Wi-Fi password, but the truth came out, not through prejudice but through data." An older man raised his hand. "How do we know this won't happen again?" he asked, his voice tinged with worry. Jalen nodded, his gaze confident. "I'll show you how to secure your Wi-Fi and cameras. But more importantly, we have to protect each other by listening, not judging. When we suspect someone because they're different, we miss the real threats, like what happened with Ethan." Pat stood, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm the one who was wrong," she said, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. "I called the police because I suspected Jalen, but I was wrong. My nephew was the culprit, and I didn't see the truth because I was blinded by prejudice. Jalen helped us, and I promised to do better." The crowd murmured, a few nodding, their eyes sympathetic. Torres stepped forward, her voice clear. "Cybersecurity is a big issue, but community safety starts with trust. Follow Mr. Harris's guidance and report anything unusual." The meeting ended with applause. An elderly woman hugged Pat, whispering, "You were brave to admit that." Jalen packed up his laptop, his eyes shining. He hadn't just cleared his name, he'd planted the seeds for a better neighborhood. As the crowd dispersed, Pat approached Jalen, her eyes sincere. "Thank you, Jalen," she said, her voice soft. "Not just for today, but for giving me a chance to make things right." Jalen Harris's story is a powerful wake-up call about the consequences of prejudice. Just for changing his Wi-Fi password, Jalen, a black network engineer, was reported to 911 by his neighbor Patricia Walsh, falsely labeled a threat based on his reserved nature and skin color. Pat's blind prejudice didn't just hurt Jalen, it obscured the truth. Her nephew Ethan had hacked the neighborhood security cameras, watching everyone. Jalen, once a suspect, became the one to uncover the scheme, proving that truth and determination can overturn injustice. He didn't just clear his name, he turned the ordeal into an opportunity, hosting a neighborhood meeting to teach cybersecurity and build trust. Pat, though wrong, represents those who let fear and bias guide them. Her regret upon facing Ethan's guilt reminds us that snap judgments can cause deep harm, even blinding us to dangers right in front of us. Ethan, with his unethical curiosity, shows how technology can become a weapon without responsibility. The story highlights a key lesson: prejudice divides, but truth and empathy unite. Jalen didn't choose revenge, he chose education, urging the community to listen, observe, and ask questions before jumping to conclusions. Have you ever judged someone based on their appearance or differences, or been suspected just for not fitting in? Reflect on this. A moment of suspicion can change someone's life. Like Jalen, we can stand up and use the truth to heal. Start by building trust in your community, learning to protect each other, and refusing to let prejudice obscure the truth. Did this story resonate with you? Share your experiences in the comments. Have you ever faced prejudice? If Jalen's journey inspired you, hit that like button to show your support, share to spread the message of truth and unity, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more meaningful stories. Together, we can build a world where everyone is seen for their true worth. See you in the next video.